is Toronto Tech Week belongs to everyone, right? Toronto Tech Week is by definition a platform, and it succeeds or fails by the virtues of all of the hosts and all of the ecosystem in Toronto wanting to participate.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit. And last year, BetaKit broke the news that major tech conference Collision would not return to the city of Toronto. Instead, it was relocating under a new name to Canada's West Coast. So what was Toronto Tech supposed to do for those few days in June when the weather is actually nice? Well, fear not, because this year, BetaKit also broke the news that local tech leaders had come together to fill that gap with a new nonprofit volunteer-run event called Toronto Tech Week. Now, how did Toronto Tech Week come to be? What will Toronto Tech Week look like? I honestly don't really know. But to help me answer those questions, we have Tech Week founding partners and co-organizers Satish Kanwar, Ameet Shah, and Mell Truong. Now, some disclosures before we get into this. BetaKit is a Tech Week media partner, and we are also doing a bunch of dope things during the week. More details about that you can find in the show notes to this podcast. BetaKit is also majority owned by Good Future, the family office of Arthi Sharma and Satish Kanwar. But again, to point to the clear editorial divide, Satish actually had to pitch me to come on the podcast, which I thought was fair play given all the times he has turned me down to come on the pod in other endeavors. Additionally, Ameet and I also text about the Raptors, less so this season. Okay, disclosures out of the way, let's get talking about Toronto Tech Week. And Ameet, I'm going to go to you first, not because the Raptor season is, by the time this is released, blissfully over, but I wanted to know about like the origin of how something like this comes to be. Like, community-driven things don't just happen top down. There's a bubbling up. There's a organic kind of rise to the yeast of the event. And I want to know like what the actual first moment, the genesis of this was, because I have a memory of being at the Golden Ventures Collision party last year and you just yelling in my ear for like 15 minutes about what might happen in 2025. But I'm not really sure if that was just the origin or it was very, very loud at the Golden Ventures Collision party. So why don't you take me to, for you, when this became an idea that was real enough to pursue?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, with last year obviously was last year the Collision was going to be located in Toronto, and we felt that there was going to be a gap, right? One of the great things about large conferences is it's a galvanizing moment. It gets people out, and we learned over time that, even just the side events had become their own thing and really popular. We throw our annual party, we have a bunch of other events, and there's many other notable things happening that week. And it was a force to really bring the community out. And so during that week, with all of us knowing that this is going to be the last year, we started having conversations individually. And then this group started to sort of like form and, the various conversations there. And we wanted to do something that would be like truly authentic to Toronto, something that, and Canada really, right? Something that was substantive, community driven by key stakeholders, right? This idea of like locally led and local support to ultimately drive like maximum benefit. So I think that's when the kernels happened, at least for me, but I know, some of the other folks here had also been having conversations. There were other events that had, other projects and events that had occurred at different times. And so that's early on, that in earnest, that's when we started to have these conversations, and we were sort of testing the hypothesis with just different people we knew, and everyone's like, yeah, you should do this, or we should do this. Actually, it was the more important thing. And Satish and I started to have a conversation, and there was some real alignment around that, and then that started to snowball. We were connected to Mell and I'll let Mel tell her side of the story.
Mhm.
And because they had been doing something in the past, and it really just snowballed from there. There was just a ton of excitement. And I think the thing that we learned the most in the city was there was so much energy. People just wanted to know where to place that energy and direct it.
Yeah. Okay. Satish, let's get you involved here because it sounds like you were the next name, and then we'll circle the score with Mel. But when was Ameet also yelling at you at a various collision event last year?
I'm always young.
How did that conversation go? I guess maybe even could you speak to when this comes from engaging with people in the community to actually structuring to a nonprofit and organizing this in a way that it's a tangible thing?
Hmm.
I honestly never really talked to you about that process in any detail, so we might as well do it on a podcast.
Amazing.
Um, so walk
Well,
us through
for me, like all good things, it started with a tweet. I think coming out of
it.
last collision, I kind of opined on X that the side events this past year, like all years, were just way more interesting and authentic than everything that happened at actual collision. And that's not because there's anything wrong with collision per se. It's that the audience for that event is necessarily different than the audience of Torontonians and Canadians in tech and what the community needed from each other. And we found a lot of that kind of company and context and kind of relationship building happening at these smaller format, locally organized, kind of authentic gatherings. And that tweet in its own way kind of snowballed to interest and DMs and people just saying, well, someone needs to make that a reality. Like we need to bring these initiatives, the people, the energy together. And we dug us some real peacemaker. I started the process of trying to just understand what people were working towards. Were there places that I could help? That was a conversation with me. That eventually was a conversation with Mel. Conversation with Taha and the team that also ran an experiment around Toronto Tech Week before. And a number of the other founding partners you see, just trying to understand what everyone was building towards. I think the thing that I love most about the Toronto tech community is just how motivated everyone is to do the right and best thing for the ecosystem over all else. And so it was like a really easy and inspiring set of conversations of people coming to the shared realization that we could all just pull off one massive thing together a lot better by combining these resources than trying to build in a lot of different directions. And because of the natural energy and anxiety that was out there post collision, from people at all levels, like people that attended, people that partnered, people that hosted, people that were part of making it happen from different parts of the city, it we just had an opportunity to give like an a confident answer that everyone could stand behind because of how grassroots and open it was. And that's what Toronto Tech Week became. So those conversations from the spring kind of carried into the fall, where it became obvious to everyone that we could do one thing together. And by the end of the year, it was formalized as a nonprofit with the very grateful support of the city of Toronto and our other presenting sponsors, Shopify and Google Cloud, that were early movers and saying we believe in this vision at its point of formation. And so that all made it something that went from like great idea to tangibly possible. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right now. And somehow I found myself in a co-organizing seat in that process.
So you fired off the tweet, right? So
It was a
obviously,
tweet.
okay. So Mel, let's talk about you getting engaged with this because you were already doing community-driven Toronto tech stuff prior to this, right? With Tech Fest. So when did that become part of this, and then get, I guess, collated into one? I think Satish said like collective energy.
Yeah, it was funny. So there was a lot of conversations around Collision leaving this year and what would fill the void. And um, even to be honest, not this year, but last year at Collision, um, a couple of small early stage founders were having sort of the same conversation. And we knew that it was going to be this year going into the last year that Web Summit was going to be doing Collision here. And so um, I remember in 2024, we were like, there's something missing. Not that we needed to fill a void, but I had been to LA and New York Tech Week and just loved the idea. And Satish had mentioned this as well of like, and Ameet of like, people go to the conferences, but they love the side events and how vibrant the nightlife is. And you're waiting for the invitation or like you're trying to figure out what side events are happening in the evening. And so TechFest kind of came to be with a group of really early stage founders just trying to see if it would stick. And so in May of last year, we did something on a smaller scale, early adoption, lots of early stage founders got involved and saw it like there was interest and there was appetite for something like this. And I just think that at that point, we didn't have the resources to make it go big and go to scale of what we wanted to. But we also realized that like this is something that is actually really needed. And this year when I was talking to Ameet and Satish, it was just the perfect storm in the best way of why don't we band together this year, make this the all new Toronto Tech Week along with Daybreak, who obviously did their smaller tech week last year as well, and just join forces and do it for the greater good of Toronto because it's one needed. Two, we know that people love this type of stuff. And so that's kind of how I came to be. I remember Ameet, I don't know if you remember this, but we were on a call and Ameet was talking about Toronto Tech Week. And I'm like, I was going to talk to you about Toronto Tech Week. And so that kind of was how that happened. And it was just serendipitous in a little bit of a way. And so just grateful to be able to work on the all new Toronto Tech Week this year with the team.
I think Mel touched on something that's really important in the underlying principles of what brought this whole group together and what we're doing here is Toronto Tech Week belongs to everyone, right? Toronto Tech Week is by definition a platform and it succeeds or fails by the virtues of all of the hosts and all of the ecosystem in Toronto wanting to participate. At its core, it is us declaring a week in time and permission for everyone to come and hang out, share what they're working, do amazing things together, and mostly try to get out of the way from that. But by taking all this amazing energy that we have, taking the best of Toronto, which is in the summer, in the days that you mentioned, Douglas, and putting on all of our shows at the same time so that people inside and outside the city can see it in its best form, that it's just a platform. And the response, the way that from early stage founders, the VC community to corporates and scale ups and like everyone has really rallied from the get-go of us announcing this to say that makes sense and that everyone can feel the part of it that they own for themselves. I think that's like really important in what we're trying to do here, really inspired by what's made tech weeks in other parts of the world pretty successful.
Yeah. I want you to maybe follow up on that because I know there are some people that might hear, sidecar events on this. They might get a view of tech people in Toronto being like, we like going to the thing next to the thing, the adjacent exclusive after partying thing. But what Satish just said about permissioning makes a lot of sense because you kind of need collective tissue to drag the attention or consolidate the collective network. I maybe want to take that a little bit because you've been running with Golden a variety of events in around Collision for a couple of years now, and just other events that you do as well. I don't want to make this just a Collision thing, but with this and that permission to like define a week for people to attend at the high level, is this more for people in the GTA area to connect and have that permission to come together? Or is there still an element of bringing people to the GTA because there is a calendar of stuff to justify the time spent?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? I think it starts with this idea of like locally led, right? If we can bring the community together and give them a good reason to come out, celebrate, participate in the various events that are going on, that's like sort of the first step, right? Naturally, what ends up happening is with like a lot of local attention, it draws the attention of others, right? And, as we saw from the announcement earlier this week around homecoming, we were able to we were able to attract folks both locally from the ecosystem and abroad that are quite notable. Will bring and give a lot of those people in the ecosystem a reason to be out. And so the idea was really create this maybe one or a series of anchor events that exist throughout the ecosystem, one of which is being planned by this group here, but everything else being driven by the community, and using those as various focal points for people to rally around to participate. Yes, we plan on throwing actually a multitude of events under the Golden brand, but we're also participating, sponsoring, and attending other events throughout the community. And just this idea of granting license for people to personalize and do what they want to do, and in whatever capacity, that's what's really drawn the energy out. Like, I think all of us were really surprised by just like the level of exuberance and excitement from the community and the willingness to participate. And it was funny because initially, I think some of the initial reactions were, there's going to be too many things. Like, how
Mm.
are we going to compete? And we sort of really encourage people to lean into that and sort of say, well, use that as a way to make a unique experience that's authentic to you, your brand, your beliefs, whatever it is that you're ultimately optimizing for. And as a result of that, as you can see, we've got over 100 events, individual events planned that target, various groups of the community. And I can tell you, as someone who spends a lot of time sort of south of the border, everyone's really aware of this. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and I had people walking up to me saying like, "Hey, heard about Toronto Tech Week, want to be there. We happen to know that there's like at least 40 to 50 like fairly notable folks flying up for that event, and we think that number's increasing by the day."
Maybe Mel, I'll go back to you because you had mentioned like LA Tech Week and maybe a couple of others. Was there any lessons taken from approach there, either with Tech Week this year or Tech Fest last year? I'm also noting like when this thing was announced, it was announced with I think 40 community partners, and that's gone up. If you check the site as of recording, to over 60. What was the process of getting those people on board? Was it just all those Twitter DMs and simultaneous conversations, and people were putting their name to it, or was there structure to that? I'm really interested in how the making sure it stayed community level and community driven maintained throughout the whole ideation.
Yeah, no, and it's super interesting. Going to LA Tech Week as an attendee was really exciting, but and it's quite different than trying to be the supporter of and organizing Toronto Tech Week, and being kind of behind the scenes, helping and empowering the community and making Toronto Tech Week happen. And so, like as you mentioned, even when we first started and kicked it off with 40 partners, and now after calendar launch, we're sitting at close to 150 partners, I believe. I think it's the consistency, the consistent support that we're able to offer to folks, to empower them to host their event. I think there's excitement to do something, and then there's like the support to actually deliver and commit and follow through and be empowered to do something. So while Toronto Tech Week is decentralized and it's for the community by the community, a lot of folks still have questions about, well, how do we take part, and what's Toronto Tech Week's ownership and what's our ownership and things like that. So I think a lot of the process is the education piece, the empowerment piece, and just taking best practices from different tech weeks and just things that we've done in the past with community events, empowering more and more folks to do their own thing.
Okay. I mean, I want you to follow up on that because when this was announced, I was interviewing you. Well, you were in a different continent. We were many time zones away, but I was firing you questions and you were sending back responses very, very late or very, very early in the morning. You'd said, this is being led by builders from the community. So the focus is on substance, real insights, real discussions, real experiences that move the ecosystem forward. Yeah, I think this is the most important part, though. We're all stewards of this ecosystem, and it's incumbent upon us to help it achieve its true potential. That resonated with me personally as someone who knows both you and then covers and attends the work that Golden does. I would say it's also a sentiment you haven't heard much of locally or maybe across Canada since pre-COVID. So you just want to even speak to that idea of, we talked about permission, we talked about platform. also just sense of like local responsibility. Because again, going back to the collision counter example, there was always that level of complaint or consternation, excitement that this global event thing had come here, but it wasn't necessarily being driven by here. We were the host location. And this seems like a complete inverse in intentionality, like all the way through.
Yeah, I think, I'm going to steal something that I think either Satish or Harley said, but the cavalry is not coming. And there's just, if you even rewind to just general sentiment in Canada, in the ecosystem, um, you know, in and around this time last year, I think there's just a lot of things going on that people were unhappy with. Some of the policies that were being discussed at a federal level were, sort of top of mind, and builders kind of maybe felt underrepresented and maybe not sort of like cared for, or sort of getting their due. And I think that was also part of this. If I think back, was just this idea of, look, like everyone's talking about it, but no one's doing anything about it. So how do we do something about it? And then like give everybody an opportunity to participate in that. And, I do use the line of sort of like, we are all stewards of this ecosystem as a way to include everyone who wants to participate, right? Like if Toronto wins, or if Canada wins, Golden Ventures wins, BetaKit wins, and every other organization that chooses to call Canada home likely wins just by sort of rising tide. And that's something that, I believe in. I know everybody on this call believes in around this. And so we really tried to push that forward and make it and make people feel like a sense of duty, loyalty, some sense of nationalism around this, right? It's our job to push this community forward. No one's going to hand it out to us. And I think just that mindset, and having a growth mindset and the ability to positively affect change, is something that we should highlight, embrace, and push to the extremities of the ecosystem. And one of the things I'll say related to that is there's so much excitement around, while it's called Toronto Tech Week, we are seeing like groups that are tangentially related to tech or participating around that, like them sort of kind of jumping onto this, which is awesome, because Toronto and Canada is so much more than tech. And, knowledge workers represent something like 11% of the workforce, but everybody is being affected by technology. And, I've got friends in different industries that have been asking, like, how can I get involved? This is really important. And if tech can be, a driving force for this to like unite across different groups, I think that's amazing. And really that's the goal at the end of the day.
Okay. Satish, maybe a couple of things here. First, it seems like what we're indicating here is if you read Satish's tweets now, you'll know what's coming down the pipe in like 6 months, which you cannot say about my tweets. My tweets are entirely reactive. There's no planning or forethought in any of them. But in terms of like the stepping up and doing something, I'll note here, this is, we talked with Mel with Tech Fest. This isn't your first rodeo when it comes to community driven event stuff, because you were one of the co-organizers of Startup Open House. I'm wondering if anything Ameet said there is part of getting the city on board, or like if there was an ask there, or there was just alignment, because it is notable that like the city and our former mayor was a huge proponent of making an event like that happen in the city, and went outside the city to make it happen. And the city of Toronto was happy to support that event until it wasn't, and then it moved. This is launching as a community locally driven thing, whether it's across Toronto, across the GTA. We'll bring in, all parts of Ontario that want to be a part of that. Like no judging here. Was there a direct ask there? Was it aligned intentions? Was the timing just right? I'm very interested in how the city of Toronto under a new mayor comes to be involved in something like this again, but like locally born.
I think the environment and context has changed a lot over the last 5 years. And so I think there was definitely a period in time where bringing outside influence, event organizers, company investment, all of these things was one of the best levers we had to establish Toronto's global reputation as a tech powerhouse and a future tech economy. I think since that time, like it's become way more obvious at a global level how much tech talent, capital, startup energy is in this market. And so the responsibility for telling that story has to fall onto the market itself to tell it in an authentic and unique way on a global scale. And so that means the context has changed. Like it's grown a ton in that period. It's found its footing and confidence and voice. Has lots more examples of companies that are crushing it and scaling and raising globally. And so I think the decision making at a city level should evolve with that, which it has, and is I think reflective of it taking in new information. And so, once upon a time was on Mayor Tory's Economic Innovation Advisory Council, and was really supportive of the decisions around collision in that period. I also work on the board of Toronto Global, which does a lot to do investment attraction into the city. And through those and other community relationships, we brought this proposition forward to the city to say, here's a way of rewriting the fundamentals based on the new context. Far more efficient way in building a platform, far more local and authentic way, a nonprofit and volunteer run way to answer the question with the best and latest information on how to make and champion Toronto tech globally and for itself. And so I think that's kind of what brought us to the table and to a point where we could launch this initiative with the city's official support. And it's amazing what the economic development team here in the city does and all of its partners to kind of manage the number of sectors that Toronto's really strong at, and I think it needs good partnership. It needs communities as healthy as our tech one so people can step up and do it. We can't expect the city to do it for us, but to know that they're there when called to say, like, here's a way, you can put your fingerprints on the right thing that's going to be net beneficial to everyone, and they answer that call, I think is a really amazing sign of what the city is doing to champion tech here.
Okay.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd like to add too is, in addition to the city, partners like Shopify and like Google recognizing the importance of this ecosystem within Canada and globally was really important. Those were two quick commits from those groups and who are putting like real meaningful force behind this, and candidly, like the combination of those three groups, without all three groups sort of participating, this wouldn't be happening. So we're deeply appreciative of that. But we also think it's very much shows their commitments to both the city and the country as well.
Okay. I think we've talked enough about how this thing came to be. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll actually talk about what's going down. And I want us to highlight some of the events that will be taking place during Toronto Tech Week.
This week's episode of the BetaKit podcast is presented by Float, Canada's complete business finance platform. Float combines modern financial services and software to help businesses spend smarter, save more, and grow faster. We wanted to know, how do businesses use Float to transform their financial operations? Tanya McChesney is a finance manager at Archon Systems, which helps customers in retail, wholesale, and manufacturing take the hassle out of inventory management. Tanya, thanks for being here. So you run the finance team at Archon.
I pretty much am the finance team at Archon. We have a fractional CFO who is engaged in a lot of pieces, but the soup to nuts, the day-to-day is me and me and me.
So tell me, what were the challenges that you were dealing with before you moved to Float?
We had 2 credit cards, one Canadian, one USD, and that was being shared among a team of about 50. So I can't tell you how many receipts, how many transactions, chasing after, trying to figure out who was responsible for it, whether we still needed a subscription, who had the receipt, if there was a receipt, was this even a valid transaction? And then two, because it was under a credit facility, we would bump up against a limit every month. I'd have to go into the bank to like make a transaction, especially on the US dollar account. Like they'd have to bring out this binder. It was a whole process with a check and such. So we couldn't react quickly if something unexpected came up. And I was just spending a lot of time.
So what did expense reconciliation look like before Float?
So before we went to Float, we were using a separate expense reimbursement program. And our employees, once a month, they were entering their expenses, uploading their receipts. Our HR person would then take the information from that system, put it into an Excel file, take the information from that Excel file, and take it over to our payroll provider.
What about your month-end close? I would imagine in a lot of companies, right? That's really like a headache of a process. So what was the biggest bottleneck for you in terms of month-end?
The biggest bottleneck was trying to do the reconciliation of the credit card statements. And, I needed the support and I needed to get information about the coding. And because I couldn't always be sure of who had initiated a certain transaction, I didn't always know who to go to for that information. And when we transitioned to Float afterwards, we found that there were some duplicate subscriptions and where there were opportunities we could have folded subscriptions together to save money.
So when you were choosing which system you wanted to use, what made Float stand out compared to other solutions?
Their whole organization is very reflective of Archon. Our motto is we build software that help small business. And I felt that Float was the same way. They were innovative, they were responsive, they were there to support the whole transition. And it's a small business and that's growing by leaps and bounds. And we want to grow with an organization like that.
Once you started using Float, was there another specific pain point that you found they solved that you were kind of surprised by?
To make life easier for the employees. We do allowances every year for our employees for both home office and health and fitness. And previously, everybody had to sort of pay and then ask for reimbursement. But with Float, I was able to issue individual cards to every single employee. When we're sending people on conferences, I can issue a conference card, both physical or virtual. I can turn that card off when they're back from conference so it's not sitting in somebody's wallet as a security risk if they lose it. If somebody's off at conference or at a sales show and says, hey, I'm about to take a bunch of potential clients out for dinner. I don't have enough on my Float card. I can just go bip, bap, boop, increase the limit, and they're ready to go. So the responsiveness that the Float system gave us was extraordinary.
What kind of things have changed at Archon since you started using Float? Are you seeing sort of like efficiencies, time saved, money saved?
We started off with just the basic credit cards or prepaid cards, I should say. And then there's always something new coming out, which I love. We've added the bill pay, the EFTs, which again allows us to get the approval system done right within Float. Everyone was already familiar with the platform. So adding that in and saying, okay, Ian, you sent me an invoice. I'm going to put it into Float. I'm going to code it. I'm going to send it to you. You're going to approve. I've got the record of the approval right here, paying it out of my Float balance. It's a one-stop shop.
What's it been like working with the Float team itself?
The Float team has been incredible. I've had the same account manager since we first started. We had weekly meetings to make sure that the transition was great. I've since met other members of the team and they've been just as supportive, just as responsive anytime I have a question. And the response I get the most often when I call up with an idea is the development team's already working on it.
Across the country, businesses like Archon Systems are choosing Canadian tech to power their growth. Float provides a homegrown solution for corporate cards, automated expense management, next-day bill payments, and 4% interest, helping companies take financial control with ease. Join more than 4,000 companies that trust Float for better financial management. Switch today at floatfinancial.com.
Okay, let's dig into this thing. because this is a new event that has not happened yet. And the experience of it will be different than maybe the vision that you all collectively have in your brains of it, particularly since it's a community driven event with, oh my God, if you go to the website, there are so many things happening. So I want to help our audience who might be excited about this kind of like have a pathway forward to engage. So I'm going to rapid fire basically FAQ you guys on your own tech week. I think first, maybe Mel, I'll start with you. Just who can attend, who is attending, who should be attending Toronto Tech Week.
Yeah, if you are in tech, passionate about tech, want to dip your feet into tech, you should be attending. There are so many events happening that week that's geared towards early stage founders, late stage founders, VCs, student bodies, rising entrepreneurs, CPG, healthcare, all that stuff. And so it's pretty amazing to see what's kind of come together and the series of events that's available to almost anyone in the public who wants to lean in. There's an event for you. We're expecting tens of thousands of people to be in the city at that point in time, looking for things to do and attending Toronto Tech Week. So I would say like for it's a call to action for anyone to kind of jump in and attend Toronto Tech Week.
Okay. I'm going to flip it on the other side quickly, and then I want to get into the specific events. But like, if you are consuming this right now and you're like, oh my God, we should be doing something, who can host an event and how do they go through that process? Is it too late? Did they miss the window? Are you still allowing people to kind of get in under the auspice? Are you even trying to control that? What's the process to host a Toronto Tech Week event?
Yeah, it's a decentralized system, so anybody can get involved and host an event. It is not too late. While we have pushed out our first preview of events with our first partners, we have many organizations who are actively planning events, and we'll be adding them to the calendar between now and June 23rd. And so for anyone who is thinking about hosting their first event, who usually hosts events, who wants to host a dinner or a social or something, there's always time. And we welcome more and more events to be added to the calendar because there's going to be, again, as mentioned, so many people in the city looking for things to do.
Okay. And these are both public and private events, right? My Crack podcast research team ran the numbers on the site and told me that almost 50% of the confirmed events are open to the public or contain open, like public access to some component, which means there are some kind of private or invite only or maybe like a little bit more heavily vetted events as well, correct?
Yeah, there's going to be a pretty good mix of private and public. I will say, I feel like there is more public events than private, but there is a mix. And if you go on the torontotechweek.com website, it's really easy to navigate between the open events versus private and be able to kind of see which ones you can register to for the ones that you're interested in.
Okay, we will include a link to that in the show notes, but I pre-warn everyone, you've got to get past the little TTC video game thing at the top of the website. And if you're distracted there, you will never actually look at the calendar. So like be forewarned.
Yeah.
With this, and you were talking about this being a decentralized platform, right? Is there a universal ticket? If you're looking to attend, can I just click a button somewhere and say, Ameet, I just PayPal'd you $15. Can I get into all of Toronto Tech Week? How is that working?
You actually have to text Satish. That's the actual way. But no, the idea around that is really it's a choose your own adventure. There is this sort of opportunity to pick and choose the events that best sort of like resonate with what you are attempting to do. And these events are dispersed throughout the city, and we really try to leave it up to people to pick and choose what best suits what they're trying to achieve and what is interesting to them. And that's by design, and helps sort of like take this large massive events and sort of distill it down to the ones that are best representative of what you want to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point because especially for people who have maybe come into Toronto for Elevate or CIX or Collision, other events. This is all over the city. This isn't necessarily like a fulsome home base here. This could take place on the Don Valley Parkway. Like this, anything could happen during Toronto Tech Week in terms of like an event venue, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's certainly some clusters and areas, such as like King West, the financial district, where there are a number of well-known event spaces where things are popping up. But we're definitely seeing things East End, West End of the city, and everywhere. And like, there's a cool little map. You can kind of see where everything is located, and encourage you to check it out on TorontoTechWeek.com.
Okay. You had again, we referred to your quote before about like real substance for the focus here from the community. Is this just a week of panels? Like what's going on? Like what type of events are we talking about here? Can you and you can shout out specific ones here, or even just highlight some of the breadth of experiences. I'm cheating a little bit because I'm in the Tech Week Slack, so I've seen some people
Oh,
just
you
like
are.
what they're loading up and suggesting, which are very very unique. But like, can you give any sense of the different types of experiences that might be taking place?
So there's a good range, like you said. Maybe to give a few examples, and like you would at any conference, we want people to go on the calendar and kind of build their schedule. So you could filter the calendar by category and type of event too, and like was shared earlier, you can see the ones that might be invite only. You can still see that they are there, and so if you have kind of involvement with an organization and you want to go to that event, you can include it. But for example, there's a set of events that are large, like 1,000 person, like speaker, fireside content type formats. There's the one main stage event Toronto Tech Week is doing called Homecoming, that is really geared around setting this global narrative for the city. BetaKit is doing its town hall. The University of Toronto is doing a massive AI speaker series at Convocation Hall. So those are examples where you just have these large format instances. There's lots of more kind of few 100 person gatherings that are much more networking oriented or connecting around like a deep topic. So Shopify is doing a dev day as technical context. Google's doing a big AI gathering. Monday Girl is working with Intuit and doing like a session really focused on their community. And then there's tons and tons of parties. And I think, that's where it rounds out to really building what you're interested in. And I think there's Tech Teo Summer Social. I learned about this crazy party 111 is doing that Mel told me about, called Tulum in Toronto. And of course, there's Golden's Golden Ticket, if you can get to the Golden Ventures party, continuous tradition from Collision on.
That's where you actually do need to PayPal Ameet or talk himself privately in some way. Okay,
But
so
Mel, what would you highlight? I know Mel's like so close to all the
yeah,
events because she's been front lines with the whole community, and there's like 100+ hosts building this stuff. So what else?
Yeah. No, the nice thing about, well, the incredible thing about this week is that there's so many variations of events, from like mixers to fireside chats to private dinners to poker games. People are leading hikes. Tenure, an HR tech organization, is leading like a large HR tech crawl. And ends off at a bar in Midtown. And so what we've also been telling folks too is, as you're hosting events, this is such a special week to highlight and open your doors to a new demographic and new people coming into the city, and hosting what you feel comfortable hosting. So we've had folks talk about hosting events at like a record store and doing like a music jam, or teaching folks to DJ, and just very out of the box, unique things like that. I know Othership is leaning in quite hard and partnering with some tech organizations and doing some exclusive like Othership experiences. So there's a lot of fun things. And yes, 111 is planning a 800+ person party in the Well, bringing Tulum to Toronto. So that's also really exciting. But like every day, I think there's a large event happening, but then a bunch of series of like smaller events curated to, again, specific industries and folks.
yeah, I'm really glad we got that in there because I want to, we're going to talk a little bit more about like some of these anchor events and what those mean and the focus. There's no way that we could talk about every possible event, but I did want to note that kind of spectrum of size. I think there was one that I saw where it's like a couple of people being like, "Joe, we're going to go golfing or hit the driving
Yeah.
range. Is that allowed?" And it was like, "Yes, approved, check, get it done." If anyone at MLSE is listening to or watching this right now, and you would like to host BetaKit on the OVO practice court,
Yeah.
you can tweet me at Tron right now, and we will be there. We will make that happen. That is the open pitch for another Tech Week event. I do again, the Crack podcast research team let me know that of the data set that is currently publicly available, kind of like across the themes, and there's some work here that you guys had to do to even like compile, collate these events, but the top 5 themes are AI, fundraising and investing, B2B, B2C, and then engineering focus. So like there's some topical breadth there in addition to like the experiential breadth. All of that is well and good, but we got to talk about some of these anchor events, the major events. Satish, you talked about the homecoming event. I'll note that takes place after BetaKit's events, our BetaKit Town Hall, and then our most ambitious after party, which will coincide the launch of our print and digital edition. Siri Agrell, our CEO, would have broken my knees if I did not mention that at this point in time. So we're covered there. We're kind of kicking things off a little bit. So stay tuned for that on the Monday. And again, in the show notes to this, you will have the most up to date links for all of that stuff. But because this was announced with some like anchor community partners, and you had noted that like each day there are intentions towards large scale events to make sure that there's a broad attendance to, like, Satish, can you just talk through those anchor events, what that's like? Maybe talk a little bit about homecoming. I want to make sure that people aren't overwhelmed by this, but can understand that each day there's probably like a couple of things to lock into, particularly Tuesday through Friday after the BetaKit events on Monday, because we completely own that day.
Like, you know, the having the spread of different size and type of events is important because the community is actually so big. And I think that's where people don't realize how large tech in Toronto and interest in Toronto has gone. And so when we talk about somewhat casually, like we have these 1,000-person events each day happening, that's still just like a small fraction of the audience that is actively building, investing, growing, working inside of these the tech sector here, yet alone people that have a vested interest in the sector. And so, it's why it's so important that this range exists so we can have as much of participation possibility for people than not. And it's what makes it super fun. And so homecoming is both one of those great larger format events where a lot of people can get engaged. It's the morning of June 24th, a Tuesday. It's also going to be streamed live. And so it's, and I think a lot of these larger events are going to be capturing their content and either streaming them or publishing them in different ways. So again, the max amount of people can benefit from them. But the most important or unique thing here is like we chose to build that event because we wanted to ensure there was this moment in time. It's only the morning of the Tuesday where we could build kind of a global narrative or shared kind of focused conversation about the stage and future of tech in the country. And I think that's where the homecoming events really meant to be this beacon that we can both through streaming and through promoting Toronto Tech Week ahead of time, bring talent that's connected to Toronto back home, to come see what the city's been up to, come invest back their time and capital in the ecosystem to help build them, whether they were founders here once before, students here, worked here, were born here, but really just like build this density of like Torontonians and Canadians and tech are everywhere. And I think people that always talk about traveling to the Valley and just running into Canadians everywhere, we want to give them a reason beyond just Toronto Tech Week as a whole, like a specific moment where we're saying, this is where we're asking you to come back. Come and be a part of the energy, of the part of the city, part of the story, contribute in whichever way you can, or tune in to like know, what's happening from the people that are building and backing and buying into what Canada's all about. So that's going to be like a really kind of pivotal moment for us in the week, just to be able to bring some of the most renowned Canadians and founders that are connected to our ecosystem, to the stage and just have these real conversations, just real talk, no slides, no other BS, just like honest, direct engagement around, what we're doing here.
Okay. So we I think we've talked this through in fair detail. people, if your appetite has been wet here, you're going to go to torontotechweek.com to see all the events. You can build your schedule out. You can map your plan. You can stay tuned for that OVO practice court, because I'm sure someone at MLSE is going to hear this and be like, done, sold. You're going to go to betakit.com to see coverage from as many events as BetaKit can possibly attend that week. We promise we're going to do our best. We're hoping for a high batting average. And then in the show notes, you're going to see links to the specific announcements about the events that we're hosting. I want to maybe close this off with each of you, kind of like a tweet length answer of, at the end of this week, after people have maybe taken an Alka-Seltzer and got some sleep, the one takeaway that you want them to have from this, or the one thing that you want them to say about Toronto Tech Week, and we'll kind of rotate through here. So Mel, we'll start with you. What do you want people taking away? What do you want them saying about this when the week is done?
I want them to say what a awesome week it was and how tired they were, because they leaned in so hard. So maybe it's also two-part, but the second is just like making those really authentic connections that you make outside of a regular conference setting. But just making those meaningful connections and really leaning in, making the week your own, and just have it be really, really memorable for 2025.
Okay. Ameet, what is your one takeaway, or the thing that you want people saying at the end of this? Is it, dang it, I wish I had gotten one of those golden tickets?
I want everyone to kind of walk away either thinking or saying, like, I had no idea how like vibrant and deep the Toronto tech ecosystem is. And I also want them to think, I can't believe I made this many connections. I can't believe I just met this person here and they were just right down the street.
All right, Satish, close it off, man. You've shot the tweet, and then this became your responsibility. What do you want people being like? Is it be careful what you tweet? What's the takeaway here?
We want people to come hang. Take the week off if you can. Take a day off if you can. Take a morning off if you can. Take an hour off if you can. But come and see what Toronto Tech is all about. Come participate. You won't regret it.
Awesome, guys. Okay, I know there's a lot of work to happen between now and that hopefully very, very sunny, warm week in June. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking people through such a community-driven thing.
Thank you
for
for having
having
us.
us.